I never imagined the same quiet street where I'd once taught my daughter to ride her bike would someday resemble a war zone. But that night, the air itself felt electric, heavy, tense, as if it were waiting for something terrible to break loose. Emma was 18 now, tall and sharp-eyed, her dark ponytail swaying as she laughed at her phone's camera. She'd been live streaming all week, trying to call out the so-called HOA enforcers who'd been harassing our neighbors. I warned her to be careful, that not every battle needed to be fought for an audience, but she inherited my stubbornness and her mother's unshakable sense of justice. The sun had just slipped behind the rooftops when I first heard the growl of an engine, not the steady hum of a passing car, but a deep, harsh snarl coming fast. I stepped onto the porch, uneasy. At the far end of the street, a pair of headlights swung too wide and too low. The vehicle scraped the curb, corrected, and barreled forward, a black pickup, its roof rigged with crooked red and blue flashers, white decals on the doors reading A enforcement in peeling block letters. I'd seen it before, cruising the neighborhood, but this time it wasn't patrolling. It was hunting. Emma stood in the driveway, still talking into her phone, unaware. I shouted her name, but the roar of the engine swallowed my voice. The truck didn't slow. It mounted the curb, fishtail across the grass, and aimed straight for her. Time stretched. Emma froze for half a heartbeat, then tried to leap aside, but the bike tangled her legs. I was already running, boots pounding the steps, heart slamming against my ribs. I knew I wouldn't make it. The impact came with a hollow, sickening thud. The bumper caught her hip, spun her sideways, and the rear tire rolled over her legs before the driver hit the brakes. Her scream tore through me, sharper than any gunfire I'd heard overseas. The truck's engine revved again, ready to strike a second time. Instinct took over. Years of Navy SEAL training surfaced, cold, precise, automatic. I ran for the hall closet, where I kept a locked sidearm for emergencies I prayed would never come. By the mailbox, I braced, aimed steady despite the shaking, and fired at the front left tire. The bullet blew it apart in a burst of rubber and air. The truck swerved, spun, and crashed halfway into a neighbor's flower bed before stalling. Silence followed, just Emma's sobs and the hiss of the deflating tire. Then the passenger door burst open. A stocky man in a cheap tactical vest jumped out, brandishing a sawed-off shotgun. His fake-looking badge caught the porch light as he shouted through a still-blaring bullhorn, "Put the gun down." Porch lights flicked on up and down the street. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains. I kept my Glock low but ready. "Drop the weapon," I told him, voice steady. "It ends here. EMS is coming for my daughter. You raise that gun, you'll regret it." He hesitated, fear flashing in his eyes. That single pause saved us all. The driver stayed in the cab, yelling into a radio. A deeper voice came through the static, giving orders. Even distorted, I recognized it, a voice from another lifetime, from battlefields I thought I'd left behind. But there was no time to dwell. I backed toward Emma, keeping my body between her and the truck. Her face was pale, her legs bent in angles that made me sick. She gripped my sleeve with desperate strength. "Stay with me, kiddo," I murmured, gentler than I felt. "Paramedics are on their way. You're safe now." Then came another engine and the distant wail of sirens. Red and blue light washed over the houses as a patrol car rounded the corner. The man with the shotgun dropped the barrel an inch, his courage draining fast. The driver cursed and pounded the steering wheel. As the cruiser screeched to a halt, neighbors stepped onto their lawns, confusion and fear written across their faces. In that moment, I realized how close we'd come to losing more than Emma's legs that night. I lowered my weapon slightly, but I didn't holster it. Not until I saw both of those men in cuffs. I thought the war ended when I traded foreign sand for a quiet, tree-lined street. But standing there, gun still warm, my daughter crying on the driveway, the air thick with burnt rubber, I knew the fight had found its way home. This time, though, I wasn't fighting for a country. I was fighting for family. 48 hours earlier, Lakeview had looked picture-perfect. The maple trees were lush and green, sprinklers hissed across manicured lawns, and the air smelled faintly of cut grass and barbecue smoke. The kind of evening that makes you forget bad things can happen anywhere. I was rinsing a mug at the kitchen sink when I saw Emma outside, leaning on the porch rail, phone raised to catch the sunset. She just turned 18 that June, still a kid to me, though she carried herself like she was grown. A college hoodie draped around her shoulders, her hair glowing like copper in the fading light. She waved when she saw me. Dad, the light's perfect. Great for my stream. She was filming again, trying to document the HOA cops who'd been leaving bogus fines and threats around the neighborhood. She thought that if enough people saw, someone in authority would finally intervene. I wanted to believe that too. But after years in uniform, I knew bullies and bureaucrats both. Neither scares easy. Just don't make yourself the front line for views, I told her. She smiled like she heard me, but made no promises. Later that night, after she'd gone inside, I sat on the porch. Crickets hummed. The air had cooled. Then, under the street lamp, a dark pickup rolled slowly past the corner. The headlights dipped just once, like the driver was watching me. I stayed still until its taillights vanished. The calm of our little suburb suddenly felt paper-thin, like one hard push could tear it apart. The next morning, a yellow envelope appeared in our mailbox. No stamp, no address. Inside was a single slip of paper. Reminder, sidewalk must be cleared by 8 p.m. Non-compliance will result in a fine. It wasn't overtly threatening, but we hadn't left anything on the sidewalk. Emma laughed over breakfast. They're just fishing for money, she said. I didn't laugh. I'd already heard rumors about fake fees that didn't exist in any HOA bylaws. By late afternoon, I went to check on the Thompsons next door. Mr. Thompson was dragging a broken chair to the curb. He lowered his voice. You get one of those notes too? When I nodded, he frowned. They sent us 2 last week, one for a kiddie pool. We don't even own one. That evening, Emma set up her phone on a tripod at the porch, determined to catch the truck on video if it came by again. I told her not to stay out after dark. She rolled her eyes. Relax, Dad. It's just a video, not a war zone. I kept the front door open, listening. Sure enough, a little after 9, I heard it, the low rumble of that same black pickup, crawling slow enough to set the neighbor's dog barking. Emma whispered into her mic, tracking the headlights as they passed. The truck circled twice before disappearing toward the highway. Around midnight, before locking up, I did one last sweep of the street. That's when I saw it, a faint red blink near the roofline of a neighbor's house. I grabbed my old Navy binoculars from storage, an old instinct kicking in. Some habits die hard. I raised the binoculars and peered out. Hovering just above the gutter line was a small drone, the kind you could buy at any mall electronics store. It tilted once like it was looking back, then drifted off toward the main road, silent as a moth. That night I went to bed unsettled, turning over the image of that yellow envelope and the slow prowl of the black truck. I didn't wake Emma. She had class in the morning and needed sleep. But I moved the pistol from its locked case to the nightstand drawer. Looking back, I know now that was the last truly quiet night we had on that street. The signs were already there, the notes, the drone, the truck gliding by like a shark's fin, but I didn't want to believe trouble had chosen our door. The next morning smelled of coffee and toasted bagels, like any normal weekday. For a moment, the kitchen felt like a safe suburban bubble. Then I saw a second yellow envelope. This one slipped under the doormat. Just like the first, no stamp, no return address. Emma came in with her backpack still on, earbuds dangling. I held up the envelope before she could put her phone down. Hand delivered again, I said. She raised an eyebrow. Another fake fine? I tore it open. This time the words were shorter, harsher, pressed so hard the marker bled through. Tell your girl to shut her mouth. Emma leaned in, her face tightening for only a heartbeat before she masked it with a shrug. Guess they're watching my stream, she said, trying to sound amused. I wasn't. Emma, this isn't online trolling. They're driving past at night. Now they're leaving threats. She sat at the table, elbows planted like she was ready to argue. They're cowards in fake badges. If we show what they're doing, they'll back off. Bullies hate daylight. Bullies with trucks and guns don't mind daylight, I told her. They just wait until no one's filming. Her voice rose. So we keep filming. Dad, people need to see this. If no one speaks up, they'll keep scaring everyone. There it was, her mother's sense of justice burning through her teenage bravado. I admired it, even as it made me afraid. Years overseas had taught me that cameras don't always protect you when fists or bullets start flying. That afternoon after school, Emma set up her phone on the porch again, tripod legs like a gauntlet thrown. I watched from the living room as she spoke into her mic about fake patrols and extortion fees. A couple of neighbors slowed their dog walks to listen. One even gave her a thumbs up. By dusk, she came inside excited. Views are going up. A local blog shared last night's video. Maybe this will make the board act. I wanted to believe her. But I'd learned that publicity doesn't always equal protection. Still, I kept my doubts quiet. Around 9, we both heard the now familiar low rumble of the black pickup. Emma grabbed her phone. I moved to the front door. Through the blinds, I saw the truck creeping slower this time, like it was daring us to react. Then came the sound of something sliding through the mail slot. I went to check while Emma filmed from behind me. Another yellow envelope, the third in 2 days. Inside was a Polaroid, a shot of our porch from across the street, the porch light glowing over Emma's tripod, her backpack propped against the rail. Scrawled at the bottom in thick marker. Next time we knock. Emma's breath caught. That's us, Dad. I turned the photo face down and locked the doors. Enough streaming for tonight, I said. She pressed her lips tight, wanting to argue, but didn't. Later, while she pretended to study in her room, I stood in the dark kitchen, looking out at the still street. It appeared calm, neat homes under a yellow lamp, but I could feel the danger in that empty curb where the truck had idled, the way you can feel a rip current beneath smooth water. That night, I sent a quiet text to Josh Whitmore, an old friend turned private security contractor. Need eyes on suspicious activity near my block. Nothing official yet, just a heads up. I didn't tell Emma. The less she worried, the more cautious I could be. Looking back, that was the moment I knew this was bigger than a neighborhood dispute. I just didn't know how close to the edge we were. The next afternoon, on a trip to the hardware store to replace a burned-out porch bulb, I slowed at the strip mall parking lot. That's when I saw it again, the black pickup parked beside weeds and broken concrete. Its flashers were off, but the crooked decals still clung to the doors. A tall man leaned against the tailgate, cigarette glowing between his fingers. Even from a distance, I recognized the stance. One knee bent, shoulders slightly forward, like someone who still expected a rifle at his side. For a second, I thought I was imagining it. Then the sunlight hit his face. Billy Kane. The name came back like the taste of salt water. We'd shared sand-blown tents overseas, run missions shoulder to shoulder, trusted each other in ways civilians can't imagine. I hadn't seen him in 6 years, not since he left the teams and vanished. I eased my truck forward before he could see me staring. All the way home, his image burned in my thoughts. I couldn't square the man I remembered, disciplined, sharp, first to step up when things got rough, with the one loitering beside a knockoff enforcement truck. That evening, I called Josh, the same friend I'd texted the night before. He'd gone from CIA cyber work to running his own security firm. Need a favor, I said. I think I just saw Billy Kane running with these fake HOA enforcers. I need to know what he's into. Josh whistled. Kane? Haven't heard that name in years. Give me a few hours. By the time the street lamps came on, an encrypted email landed in my inbox. Attached were grainy traffic cam stills and a summary. The photos told the story before I even opened the file. Billy at the black pickup on 3 different dates, always with the same 2 men from the night of the threat, Reyes and a skinny one called Connor. The report added more. Billy had lost a property tax dispute in Lakeview 2 years ago, left the HOA bitter, picked up a string of disorderly conduct citations, then disappeared until now. I closed the laptop slowly, staring at the dark screen. It made a crooked kind of sense. A soldier trained for war, turned resentful, now playing sheriff in a neighborhood that never asked for one. Emma noticed my silence at dinner. Something wrong, Dad? She asked. I forced a smile. Just thinking about an old friend, I said, and left it there. She didn't need the details yet. Later, after she went upstairs, I stepped out onto the porch and looked toward the empty corner. The air smelled of rain rolling in off the lake. I thought about Billy's cigarette ember in daylight and the quiet way he used to say, I've got your 6, Harper. Now I wasn't sure whose 6 he had, if anyone's. I knew then this wasn't just about phony fines or rogue patrols. It was personal. And worse, it was heading toward a reckoning between 2 men who had once trusted each other with their lives. The next morning, the Polaroid still lay on the counter, its image following me like a stare. When I stepped outside, I noticed similar envelopes in 3 other mailboxes. One neighbor had ripped his in half and left the pieces in the gutter. Another taped hers to her front door with a handwritten note, Stop trespassing. The street looked like a row of houses silently pleading for help. I stopped at the Thompsons to return a borrowed ladder. Mrs. Thompson answered with the chain still hooked. "Sam, did they get you too?" she asked before I could speak. She held up an envelope identical to ours. Inside, a slip warning her trash cart was misaligned and would incur a $75 compliance penalty. She gave a bitter laugh. "After 20 years here, now my trash can's a threat to the neighborhood." I didn't have an answer. I just promised to keep an eye on their house after dark. That evening, the pickup rolled by again, this time slowing near the playground at the end of the street where the HOA kept a steel barrel for yard waste burn days. Through the kitchen window, I saw two men in dark vests climb out, toss something in the barrel, and strike a match. A thin ribbon of smoke rose before they got back in and drove off. By the time I reached the barrel, the smell of burned paper hung in the air. Inside lay scraps of yellow envelopes and citation slips, half-charred but still legible. Fine, $120, pay cash. That night, Emma showed me messages from anonymous accounts telling her to back off. Warning, accidents happen to loudmouths. She tried to shrug it off, but I caught the way her thumb hovered over the delete button. "You're not saving these?" I asked. "They're just trolls," she said. "They're evidence," I corrected. "Screenshot first next time." Around 10, we heard the low growl of the truck again. Emma reached for her phone, but I stopped her with a hand on her shoulder. "Not tonight," I said. "Let's stay dark and see what they do." We stood by the living room window, lights off, watching. The truck coasted to a stop under the street lamp 2 houses down. The driver leaned out, scanning the block like a man counting targets. In the back seat, a shape shifted just enough for the porch light to catch the edge of a backward baseball cap. Then, for no reason I could figure, the driver tapped the accelerator and rolled slowly toward the stop sign at the corner. Halfway there, the truck paused, engine idling, like whoever was inside wanted us to know they weren't finished. I peered through the windshield and saw a dark shape lift something to his face, binoculars or maybe a scope. A cigarette flared by the passenger door, and for a second my mind jumped back to Billy Kane at the tailgate the day before. The outline fit. The stance fit. I couldn't prove it, but my gut told me it was him. Emma whispered, "They're watching us right now." "Let them," I said softly. "Just don't give them a reason to come closer." They rolled away a minute later, leaving only exhaust and the echo of their passage. I stayed at the window a long time, writing down the last 3 digits of the license plate and anything else that might help later. The quiet never felt solid, thin as tissue paper. It hit me then that these weren't neighbors enforcing rules. They were predators testing yards and boundaries. Saturday arrived bright and still, the kind of day made for mowing and lemonade, but our block hummed with a different kind of attention. Emma was restless, checking her stream stats twice before breakfast and pacing the porch like an actor waiting for cues. At noon, she announced she was going live again, broad daylight, to see if the truck would show when everyone could see. I hated the idea but couldn't stop her without sparking a fight. "Stay on the porch," I said. "Don't wander off the property." "Promise me." She nodded and set the phone up, tripod legs planted like a dare. I pretended to rake flowers while keeping one eye on her and one on the street. 20 minutes into the stream, the black pickup eased around a corner, engine low and slow. Emma steadied herself and aimed the camera. "Here they come," she told her viewers. 2 men rode up front, the driver shaded by mirrored sunglasses, the passenger leaning out with a cheap loudhailer. "Clear your driveways. Noncompliance will be fined," he barked into it. Emma didn't flinch. "You're not real enforcement," she said straight to the camera. "You're harassing families. We've reported you." The passenger sneered at her. "Mind your business, little reporter," he snapped. "You're on the list." I stepped onto the lawn. "Keep moving," I called, my voice carrying. "This is private property. You have no authority here." The driver only smirked and drove off, but as he passed the porch, something thumped onto the grass, another yellow envelope. Emma's stream captured the drop. She crouched, picked it up, and held it up to the lens before opening it. Inside was a Polaroid taken from across the street the night before, our porch light glowing, her tripod visible, my silhouette faint behind the blinds. Scrawled across the bottom, thick marker strokes. "Next time we knock." Comments in the live chat erupted with panic and advice. "Call the cops." "Get inside." Emma's jaw tightened as she showed the retreating truck on camera and the photo in her hand. This is what your HOA security does, she told the viewers. I put a hand on her shoulder. That's enough for now. Stream's over. She hesitated, then ended it, visibly shaken. That evening, the clip had already been shared on a neighborhood forum and picked up by a regional blog. People called for investigations and accountability. Emma allowed herself a small grin. Sunshine's the best disinfectant, she said, but I felt the danger climbing another rung. Public exposure shames some bullies. Others take it as provocation. When I stepped outside to lock up, the street looked empty under the lamp, but I felt the same pre-mission chill I used to get overseas, the sense of eyes measuring distances and timing. Emma thought she'd shown a light on the problem. I knew we'd probably lit a fuse. Sunday should have been ordinary. Coffee on the porch, Emma finishing a college essay, me tinkering with a mower. By mid-afternoon, the light had that heavy, changeable quality that makes the air feel taut. Emma set up one last brief stream before dinner. This will be quick, she said at the driveway's edge. I wanted to tell her to stop, but could only say, stay close to the house. I'll be inside. I was rinsing a mug when the neighbor's dog barked, a sharp warning sound I'd come to trust. The hair rose on my arms before I reached the window. The black pickup was back at the far end of the street, engine louder, swinging wide around the corner. This time it wasn't creeping. It hit the curb and bounced. I shouted her name and ran, but the engine drowned me out. Through the glass, I saw her look up at the truck just as it veered toward the driveway. She froze, tried to back the bike away, but the rear wheel caught on the step and tangled her. For a split second, she was trapped, one foot on the pedal, the other scrambling for purchase. Emma moved. I yelled, already halfway down the steps. The truck never slowed. It jumped the curb with a grinding thud, tires throwing gravel. It drove straight at her. Time telescoped into slow, brutal detail. I watched the driver's clenched jaw, the crooked flashers shaking on the roof, the bicycle spokes blur. The bumper clipped her hip and spun her. She hit the pavement, and before she could roll clear, the rear tire ran over both her legs. The dull, heavy sound of that tire crushed into her will never leave me. Her scream tore across the block, raw, high, keening that broke into sobs. Neighbors froze on their porches. A woman dropped a hose and covered her mouth. Sat beside her, exhaustion and relief weighing equally heavy. Billy was still out there, but for now she was safe. I stayed until dawn. When morning came, I left the hospital just after sunrise. Emma slept peacefully, her legs propped on pillows like fragile shields. I promised I'd be back before lunch and drove home running on bad coffee and purpose. Lakeview was quiet again, too quiet. Not peaceful, but hollow, like a town that finally realized the wolves had been living next door. At my kitchen table, I spread everything out. Polaroids, burned citations, fake badges, stills from Emma's stream, and the body cam screenshots capturing Billy's orders over the radio. The audio wasn't perfect, but it was enough to prove one thing: this fight was far from over. The audio was grainy, but you could make out enough. Finish it. Don't leave witnesses. I saved every clip to a flash drive and mirrored it online. Years in the military had taught me one rule: never keep just one copy of anything important. By mid-morning, I was at the precinct with Officer Carla Ruiz. We walked the printed photos and the flash drive straight to the watch commander's office. I laid them across his desk in neat rows. These aren't rogue parking attendants, I told him. These men built a racket, false citations, harassment, and an assault on a minor. One of them is a decorated vet-turned-criminal. If this town wants order, this is where it starts. Captain Leland, a square-shouldered man with a kind of weariness that came from too many bad cases, thumbed through the photos. When he reached the Polaroid of Emma and the words, "Next time we knock," his jaw tightened. "We'll fast-track this to the DA," he said, "and we'll put out a warrant for Kane." It was the first sign of real resolve I'd heard from anyone in uniform since the nightmare began. I didn't stop there. I called Josh Whitmore, an old friend and former CIA analyst who now ran a private security consultancy. He agreed to run the HOA board's financial records, trace any suspicious payouts, any cash that might have found its way to Billy's crew. Josh promised results in a day or two. That same afternoon, I met with Dana Ellis, a local reporter who'd reached out after Emma's live stream went viral. She came to the hospital cafeteria with her notepad already open. I showed her everything: the photos, the Polaroids, the threats, the night of the attack, the standoff. Dana listened more than she spoke, her pen moving in quick, sure strokes. People need to see this isn't just neighborhood drama, she said. They need to see the faces behind the badges, fake or not. And they need to hear about the girl who stood up to them. I told her we weren't after sympathy. We wanted enough light to drive the rot out of the shadows. That night, the first article hit the front page of the local news site. Fake HOA patrol linked to assault on teen, ex-SEAL among suspects. By morning, it was everywhere. Neighbors who had stayed silent for months came forward with their own stories. Doors marked with spray paint, garbage cans smashed, envelopes demanding cash under threat of eviction. Fear had kept them quiet. Now anger pushed them into daylight. At the hospital, I showed Emma the article on my phone. She was propped up against her pillows, sipping juice through a straw, her eyes bright with something fierce and proud. "It's out there now," she said softly. "Guess sunshine really is the best disinfectant." I smiled. "Yeah," I said, "but disinfectant stings before it heals." For the first time in weeks, the air felt lighter. Not peaceful yet, but headed that way. When the trial began, the courthouse was packed. Neighbors, reporters, even strangers who'd followed the story online. Emma insisted on coming, her wheelchair marked with signatures and doodles from nurses and friends. When we rolled her through the doors, people stepped aside quietly, not out of pity but respect. Billy Kane entered last in a county jumpsuit, his posture gone slack. Our eyes met across the room. No grin this time, just a hollow look that said he already knew. The prosecution moved methodically. They played Emma's live stream, show the Polaroids, the burned citations, and the body cam audio where Billy's voice barked, "Finish it. Don't leave witnesses." Each piece landed like a hammer. The courtroom stayed, so still you could hear the reporter's keyboard clicking. Neighbors took the stand, telling stories of intimidation, of nights they pretended not to hear the truck outside. Piece by piece, the pattern built itself. When Billy finally spoke, he called it a mistake that spiraled out of control. Said he only wanted to enforce order where the HOA had failed. But the photos of Emma's injuries told the truth better than words could. After 4 days of testimony and 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdicts. Billy Kane, guilty of aggravated assault, conspiracy, and child endangerment. Reyes and Connor, guilty of impersonating law enforcement, reckless endangerment, and multiple counts of harassment. The judge sentenced Billy to 15 years in state prison, Reyes and Connor to 10 each. When the gavel fell, the whole room seemed to exhale at once. Emma squeezed my hand. She didn't smile, but the tension in her shoulders eased, and that was enough. Outside, cameras flashed. We said little. Justice had already spoken. The months that followed came slow. Emma's casts came off after 3 months, replaced by braces. Each step she took was stubborn, determined, defiant. The neighborhood began to heal, too. The HOA board held new elections, hired rail security, installed cameras that actually worked. For a long while, loud engines still made people flinch, but little by little, Lakeview started breathing again. I still catch myself looking out the windows some nights, half expecting that black pickup to roll past. Old habits die slow. But it never does. One spring evening, almost a year later, Emma and I walked down to the lake. No crutches. The sunset turned the water gold, and for once, it felt like the world wasn't watching us. "You think it's finally over?" she asked. I thought of Billy Kane behind bars, the neighbors planting flowers where tire tracks had scarred the lawns, the nights I still woke to phantom engines. "Almost," I said. "Some things take longer to heal than broken bones. But we're getting there." She nodded and slipped her arm through mine. For all we'd lost, we still had what mattered, each other, and the knowledge that we'd faced something dark and hadn't bowed to it. That night, when I locked the door and checked the porch light, just another habit, I realized the weight on my shoulders had eased. Not gone, but lighter. Justice had been served, imperfect though it always is. And Lakeview was no longer afraid. When I look back on that year, I see how close we came to losing more than peace and quiet. We almost lost our faith in one another. Neighbors afraid to speak up, afraid to believe justice still meant something. Emma's stronger now. She still walks with a slight limp, says it makes her look mysterious. Every scar on her legs tells a story she refuses to hide. And every time I see her smile at a camera again, I'm reminded why I stood my ground that night, Because silence is dangerous, and courage sometimes begins with a single voice refusing to stay quiet.